Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering the Opposition. My name is Lexi Wilson.
And my name is Dr. Nafi Salam, and our topic today will be alternative forms of talent and intelligence. So, Lexi, we've been talking about different kinds of intelligence and different kinds of talent, beyond just what's intellectual, beyond just what's measurable from a quantitative standpoint. What are some of your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, I think so often in today's society, we really just look at intelligence in the form of standardized tests, right? We think of, okay, how well are you going to do on this test? How well can you cram information? And we really lose sight of other aspects of intelligence. And there's quite a few theories on different types of intelligence and talents. And so basically, today we just kind of wanted to discuss more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was always told is that if Michael Jordan or LeBron James were to somehow take over your body, and obviously I'm not a pro basketball player, I would be a serviceable basketball player because so much of intelligence is physiological. So LeBron and Jordan and Kevin Durant, all these guys, it doesn't always just have to be basketball, but that was just the example. Athletes can take over your body, superstar athletes anyway, can take over your body and be serviceable professional athletes themselves, having taken over your body, because they know where to be. Like, for example, getting a rebound, right? Mm-hmm. It's a matter of where you need to be in relation to where the ball is shot, calculating how the ball is going to be jumping off the rim, and also a little bit of aggressiveness, of course, to push other people out of the way in a very, non-foul kind of way. Same thing with football too. I mean, some of the most, think of guys like Julian Edelman, who don't test off the charts with their 40 times or their bench presses, but they just know where to be and when to be there. So if someone like Julian Edelman, who's actually shorter than me and I believe lighter than me, but definitely faster than me, let's not get it twisted. If he were to take over my body, now he wouldn't be Julian Edelman because he's in much better shape than I am, but he would still be a serviceable football player because he knows exactly where to be, how to judge the ball in the air. So much of what makes an athlete is between the ears and not outside of, below the neck, if you will. So physiological intelligence is one sort of intelligence that I've always been taught to understand, because it really is a mental thing. Being an athlete is a mental thing.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that is muscle memory. And I really began to understand what that really meant, when I was playing soccer when I was younger, and learning how to juggle. And, when you're first playing soccer and you're kicking around the ball and you're learning, the position of where your foot should be and how basically you have to have it at a specific angle in order for it to stay up in the air and not go to the far right or the far left, and to be able to keep it in one area. And eventually, through repetition, your body will understand where it needs to be at what time without you even thinking about it. It's a very subconscious process, kind of like when you're driving and you zone off and you just magically end up somewhere or back at your house and you're like, oh, I don't remember what happened the last 20 minutes. And so you kind of have this kind of subconscious shift in your body, your body, as well as your subconscious knowing what to do, how to move your body, all those different kind of things.
Yeah, and speaking about driving, there are different levels of drivers. So there you got stunt drivers, you've got NASCAR drivers,
your daily drivers,
right? Your daily drivers,
your Uber drivers.
Well, I don't know about them so much, but there are different skill levels of driver, and there are some NASCAR drivers who've only been driving for 5 or 6 years, who are much better drivers than some people who've been driving for 40, 50 years even. So there's something to be said about that style of intelligence as well, because you're handling a machine. And somehow, I sort of liken this to parallel parking. Now, if I didn't have my rear view camera, I don't know what I would do. But, with parallel parking, like it's been difficult for some people. When I say some people, I'm talking about myself. For some people to really just back into a spot, know that it's close enough to the curb and not too far into the street. Whereas some other people can just like take any car, not just their car because they're familiar with their own vehicle, but just be able to look at a vehicle and understand how high the seat is and how wide the vehicle is, and just parallel park it without the use of any rear view camera or any like special mirror angles, and they're able to park it perfectly fine. So I think there's a level of intelligence there to be acknowledged as well that I think few people would ever acknowledge.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example of that. And one theory that we wanted to bring up was by Howard Gardner. And so he has a theory of multiple intelligences. And so he's a Harvard psychologist, and he developed this theory in the 1980s. And he just essentially just expanded on the traditional view of intelligence, such as IQ tests, right? Or, you know, the SAT, ACT, this very like traditional quantitative view of what intelligence is. And I really appreciate this theory because there's 8 different domains. There's spatial, which is like visualizing the world in 3D. So I think you can kind of attribute that to more like, you know, being outside, you know, kind of understanding where things are, kind of like bodily coordination. Then there's the naturalist type of intelligence, so understanding living things and reading nature. I think that's a huge thing that we've lost. There's still, you know, indigenous cultures around the world who are able to, you know, understand that more and, you know, really live off the land. There's musical, so discerning sounds, pitch, tone. Bodily kinesthetic, so coordinating your mind and body, just like the couple examples we gave earlier. Linguistic, so finding the right words to express what you mean. Intrapersonal, so understanding yourself, being able to have insight within your own being. Interpersonal, so that's what people would consider emotional intelligence, sensing other people's feelings and motives. And then logical, mathematical, quantifying things, making hypotheses, and proving them.
Yeah, so that's a lot of different kinds of intelligence there, and I feel like, you know, some of the most interesting, in my opinion at least, was the intraspective, you know, intelligence where you know yourself, and I think that's one of the things that I feel like most of us tend often to miss because we think that intelligence is an external direction where like, you know, intelligence is all about what you know about the outside world, when, you know, part of intelligence is knowing, you know, about yourself and your own limitations and your abilities.
Yeah, I really, really like that. And I think that type of intelligence is probably one of the most difficult. It's so easy to just point fingers at other people and to not look inside ourselves and see our own kind of shortcomings and where we can improve upon and, you know, really understand ourselves on a deeper level. So yeah, I found that one interesting. I was kind of surprised that was on there.
Yeah, I also think like the naturalist, for example, some of these styles of intelligence are sort of designed in such a way that, like, I don't know, it sort of, I don't want to say that it opens people up to ridicule because obviously it doesn't, but I could see how some people may be like, you know, naturalists, like it almost sounds like a hippie, you know, I'm one with the world. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
If you can't quantify something, then is it really intelligence? Now, I'm of the opinion, I understand you are as well, that you don't need to have something quantified in order for it to be considered intelligence. But let's go ahead and empower the opposition. What is the argument against different kinds of intelligence? All the intelligences that we just talked about, you know, just moments ago. What is the argument that would defeat this argument, right? And, you know, what is the argument on behalf of a singular quantitative measure of intelligence and none of the spatial, naturalist, bodily kinesthetic, musical, logical, mathematical? Well, that's the only one, right? Interpersonal and, like, you know, intrapersonal, linguistic. What is the argument around having only logical, mathematical be the only measurable sort of intelligence?
I think like a lot of things, someone could argue that first of all, logical mathematical intelligence is going to be one of the most easy things to quantify because, we already have a lot of standardized assessments that are able to pretty accurately determine intelligence, yes, but in very specific and very narrow, like very, very specific areas of intelligence, right? Mathematical being, there's going to be a right answer and there's going to be a wrong answer. Whereas some of these other are a little more kind of fluid. It's just going to depend, right, on like naturalist or musical, bodily, kinesthetic. I think a lot of us maybe have not even thought about intelligence in those kind of terms. Even when I heard musical, I was like, really? Really? But no, when I think about it, like you asked me to lift up one of those cellos and start playing, or a harp, like, I have no idea. That takes a whole nother level of, understanding and repetition and muscle memory and, it's hearing, and it's almost kind of like language in a way,
So I think, some of the reasons why the logical mathematical form of intelligence is deferred to on a regular basis, first and foremost, is what you touched upon, is that it's very easy to assess.
Yes.
Since there is a right answer and only one right answer, and the right answer can be like, if you've got the right answer or if you haven't gotten the right answer. It's not like, well, just give it time and they'll come to it. No, 2 + 2 is 4. It'll always be 4. So, that's a style of intelligence that's easy to assess, number one. Number two, it's also one that is easiest to make profitable. So, when you talk about SAT scores, ACT scores, when you talk about aptitude tests that relate to, careers and stuff like that, there are plenty of positions and plenty of jobs and careers out there where you have to pass certain tests, the bar exam, for example, with lawyers. This tests your ability to be successful in that particular field, and that is logical mathematical. Law is all about logic, right? So it's all about logical mathematical styles of thinking because, one, it's easy to assess, and two, it tends often to be the quickest path to profitability. Now, in the other styles of intelligence, there's no doubt in my mind that there's plenty of areas for profitability, like bodily kinesthetic. Like if you're an athlete, you're an athlete. You've got access to, but I think the reason why logical mathematical is often deferred to is because anyone can do it, right? Bodily kinesthetic, musical, naturalist, spatial, linguistic, intra and interpersonal. There's an argument to be made. And again, this podcast is empowering the opposition. So when I make a point that contradicts an earlier point, it doesn't mean that I agree with it, but it's important to give both sides. So maybe the other styles of intelligence cannot be learned. Logical mathematical can be learned. You can become a tremendous mathematician just by learning some, when I say some, I'm talking about a few hundred formulas, mathematical formulas, and all of a sudden you're a genius. You can learn through, proper schooling and proper formal education to be able to logically break down anything and almost everything, thereafter being profitable. So I think the counter argument here, once again, not that I necessarily agree with it, but if someone were here to make the counter argument, they would say that the other styles of intelligence, you either have it or you don't. Thereby, is that really an intelligence, or is it the other part of today's podcast? Is it a talent? Do you have spatial intelligence or do you have spatial talent? Do you have naturalist intelligence or naturalist talent? I can tell you, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, bodily kinesthetic talent, yeah. I mean, there are some huge, fast men and women out there who, they're just talented, genetic lottery winners, and there's an argument to be made that maybe these are not intelligences, but rather talents, which doesn't mean that they're less than or more than intelligence, but it just means that they're different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, a counter argument could be that some of these could very well be talents and not intelligences. And then kind of going along with that too, like, I think there's some things in here that you could, learn over time. Like when I think naturalist, I think, okay, can you survive off the land? Like if you went with Bear Grylls and were dropped off on an island and he wasn't there to help you, like, would you survive? Would you be able to live off the land and make sure, you have water and are able to get food? And
I'm taking Bear down with me.
yeah, I know. Bear Grylls is out of here. But yeah, there's so many different types, and at least what I enjoy about this theory is that it goes beyond what we normally think of as intelligence. And especially within our field of social work, we really work obviously logical, mathematical, there's, research there, right? So within our field, we do that, but also in intrapersonal and interpersonal, that's really all social work, understanding our own insight when we're working with clients. And then also, kind of determining where our clients at in their process, right? What are they feeling right now? What are they not saying that they're, saying in other ways? Like there's a whole nother level of this kind of like emotional intelligence within the field of social work. So it's really interesting kind of seeing all three of those within the field. But yeah, it would be interesting to get, if we were able to get someone from each of these like domains who was like really great at their craft and to hear whether they thought it was intelligence.
Yeah.
Talent.
I wonder how a musician and an athlete would speak to one another, which, music and sports go hand in hand. Musicians date athletes date musicians, as we know, pop culture and stuff like that. So it's clear that they have respect for one another. I would say that there's respect throughout. I don't think that, there's a lack of respect, generally speaking. If anything, I would say that, and this is speaking for myself specifically, like there's a lack of respect that might be coming from the kind of intelligence that I tend to excel in, which is logical and mathematical, because it's so easy to assess and because it's such a quick path to profitability.
Yeah.
People of that kind of background, my kind of background, tend often to believe that all other kinds of intelligence are either a stroke of luck, you just got lucky, or it's just something that's going to run out. That's the other thing too, is that it's going to run out. You think the logical, mathematical intelligence, unlike, maybe bodily kinesthetic intelligence where, Father Time is undefeated, you'll be able to maintain that. One of my mentors texted me during the week and she was like, this is very interesting. And like, are you practicing what you're preaching? Which whenever someone asks you that, they know that you're not.
No,
right?
they're just pointing it out.
Yeah, exactly. So
try our best.
Listen, who's not a work in progress, right? I need a lot of, this podcast is as therapeutic to me as I hope it'll be valuable to listeners. And, I can do a much better job of empowering the opposition too. So my mentor, who was on my dissertation committee as well, she said to me, well, it's cute that, you've got the whole empowering the opposition stuff. But tell me real quick what you think of qualitative research. And I was like, oh, my God. And I have read receipts on, so she knows that I read the text. And I just,
putting together a really
I have to put together a good defense for this prosecution. But I had nothing for her, and she was 100% right. This is why she's one of my mentors, obviously, because she sees things in me that need improvement. It's not like she's always breaking me down. Let's just saying constructive criticism. And she was absolutely right. She sent me some material to review about just not respecting qualitative research. I do respect it, but I'd be lying to you. And maybe it's a little threat to my professionalism or whatever, but it is what it is. I think it's known that I tend to way overvalue quantitative work. If you can't express something in numbers, then I have a tendency to sort of not discredit it, but not hold it to as high a value as something that can be communicated with numbers. which is clearly something that I need to do some work around, right? So I feel like we're all a work in progress in that sense. And these different kinds of intelligences, like, clearly one is ahead of the others as far as like respect and
what society values. I think our society values the logical, kind of mathematical model for intelligence, whereas I really enjoy like mixed methods research. So I do enjoy the quantitative, which is like the numbers, understanding the statistics behind things, but also I really enjoy the depth that comes from qualitative research, which is like when you do interviews with participants in the study, and they give you feedback on their experience or the intervention. And so you really kind of get the best of both worlds. And I think you're able to, learn a lot from the themes that are identified and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's so interesting to see like what people really value and what they, deem as, just like interesting. And, yeah, it's a very tricky thing because there are so many different types of intelligences.
Yeah. And what kind of intelligence is appropriate for what type of position, right? So one of the reasons why, we came up with this, one of the reasons why I specifically wanted to talk about this topic was because when I was with New York Foundling Hospital, in an administration type of position, leadership type of position, one of my mentors there said that, Nafis, your greatest talent is that you know what talent is. Which, like, I was really touched by that. But then, like, when I went home, I was like, did he just tell me that I have no talent?
Your talent is you can identify
right,
other
exactly.
people's talent.
It's like, so my brother and I have this joke where we'll say that, my greatest talent is that I clap hardest, I applaud the hardest for other people's
the
success.
best cheerleader.
Right, exactly. So I felt some kind of way about it the next day, I guess. But then, like, I started really thinking about it, and, maybe it was a defense mechanism on my part. But I was like, if I were to think about, like, Bill Belichick and Phil Jackson and some of the most successful coaches in football and basketball, these are, like, let's take Phil Jackson, for example. He was a professional basketball player with the New York Knicks. He sucked. Right? So, I mean, he didn't suck. Like, who am I to say
he
that
did.
he was,
I guess he sucked.
So he was good enough to be a professional basketball player, but here I am, never played anything professionally.
You're like, he's horrible.
Like, yeah, he's horrible. Like, cool. That's such a what kind of thing to say. But Phil Jackson was a much better coach and a talent evaluator. Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots as well, much better coach, much better talent evaluator than he was a player. And the idea behind that is that, can you see the potential in someone before that potential is already realized? Like, with some of the coaches and some of the GMs around the NFL and the NBA, they see talent and they see something there that can be fostered to become something that is
great.
Hall of Fame. Yeah, that is something great. Where's that? That's not necessarily logical and mathematical, because it would be very easy to pick the guy with the fastest 40, highest bench and, best 3-cone drills and stuff like that, and just have him, draft that kid. But, like, how do you figure out that a guy like Tom Brady or Donovan Mitchell or Giannis Antetokounmpo, who weren't, like, number one draft picks, would one day become, I would say, marginal Hall of Famers, if not already Hall of Famers, depending on their age. So one of the greatest talents is being able to know what talent actually looks like. And it brings us back to what you've been talking about, Lexi, is that, all of these kinds of intelligences, only one, logical and mathematical, is easily assessed.
Yeah.
But I also believe that you have to have a certain kind of talent to be able to assess those other kinds of intelligence.
Absolutely.
And then if you're really talented in that, you can make a great living. But that's not what this is about. You can really succeed and achieve great things by having that particular talent.
And I think what this kind of makes me think of is, have you ever like met somebody who like really excels in one area, right? So maybe they're like very like logical, mathematical, but maybe they don't really have a lot of intrapersonal or interpersonal intelligence, so no like emotional intelligence. Right. So maybe like they are a little socially awkward or aren't very good at articulating themselves, right? And you can see that difficulty there, like someone who's just brilliant in one of these areas, but struggles in another, and maybe is not able to articulate their intelligence to others, or may have like difficulties in other areas, like getting hired, stuff like that. So I think it's really interesting to see how they kind of interplay with one another, and how important they all kind of are in fostering like a really good, I don't know how to articulate this.
Well, what kind of intelligence would you say that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my greatest strengths, it will probably always be like emotional intelligence. I think just intuitively, I have a pretty good understanding of sensing how other people feel, and can kind of grasp other people's emotions and behaviors, and I've always had a pretty good understanding of that. I think intrapersonal intelligence, so like insight into myself, is something like I'm continuously like trying to work on. So that's kind of like a new area for me that I want to work on. Logical, mathematical, not gonna lie, I've never excelled in it. I've never been good at it.
Says the researcher, right, who's gonna get her doctorate degree. Okay.
But the thing is SPSS does all the work, okay? Let's not kid ourselves. Like,
you can take credit for it.
Yeah. But I don't know. Like, if you were to ask me to sit down and do an algebra problem right now, I'd just be like, screw this, I'm done. Like, I've always hated math. I've never really been that great at it. However, like, statistics is a little more, I understand that more than I would like algebra or some of those other like difficult types of math. But if I understand like the basics of it, the only thing I like about logical mathematical like intelligence is the results from the research, because I understand how valuable that can be, and that it is absolutely needed in order to push the profession of social work forward.
So you take the logical mathematical results and turn it into linguistic, which is why you're mixed methods, right?
Yeah.
So you take the numbers and you turn it into words. So clearly you excel in linguistic intelligence as well.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of more towards what I lean in. But then up here's kind of interesting too. Like, I'm definitely not musically inclined. Spatially inclined, like I don't know, naturalist. I'm not much of a Bear Grylls. I mean, bodily kinesthetic. I think I'm athletic in the sense that I can pick up things pretty easily. So that's kind of where I'm at. But what about
the one wheel, the boxer ball? Yeah, the history playing soccer. How quickly you picked up throwing a football?
Yeah, that was so fun.
Yeah, you obviously this is audio, so no one can see this, but like you were throwing darts after just a little while of just like, and you're very coachable too, which I don't know if maybe it's interpersonal, but crossed with intrapersonal.
I tend to talk back to my coaches, Nafis. I'm surprised you.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm just kidding.
But I mean, you pick things up very quickly. You're very, very coachable in that sense. So you take the interpersonal and you turn it intrapersonal, because even the way that you hold a football, the way that you hit the ball, the way that you ride the one wheel, like you're able to pick that up so quickly, and it's clear that every time you receive coaching, it's visibly present in your next effort. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see.
So,
like incorporating that into the other areas.
Exactly. And like, which, if we were to cross that with, there was a kid, JJ, who was there too. We were trying to teach him how to throw the ball, and it took him a little while to really just, bring your your elbow to your opposite knee, that type of follow through. It took him a little while longer. But then again, Lexi's got a few years on him too. And we were just randomly at Quinn's Pond. So it wasn't like an official coaching session. But it's clear. It's almost, you don't know where you excel in these kinds of intelligences until you find others who do not. Right? And I think that's one of the flaws to some of these, actually all of these styles of intelligence, is that you tend to think, and I make this mistake all the time, every semester a student will correct me on this, is that I assume that everything that I know is just common sense. So everyone must know how to manually calculate.
Yeah, we think everyone
deviation.
else thinks the exact same way we think. And then you're like, wait a minute here.
Exactly. And we believe
Yeah.
that other people have the same talents that we have. So for me, for example, like I would say logical, mathematical, I have that on lockdown. Not to brag, but totally
Absolutely.
bragging, right?
It does lock down. It's true. And the bodily kinesthetic. Are you kidding me?
Well, that that too. But like when it comes to like musical, definitely not. I mean, you've heard me sing. It's bad. It's really bad. I mean, you know, that's.
You don't play the piano on weekends?
No. I mean, I try to channel my inner Luke Combs, but.
I mean, I thought it was great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Naturalist, you put an ant on this table and I will turn this podcast off and I will run away. So, no to nature, please.
No to nature.
Spatial, like if this was a video podcast, I'd show you my toes and how many times I've stubbed them to the point of bloodiness. Linguistic, I think
I think you're really good at linguistic, like being able to describe ideas.
It's been a work in progress, to be honest, because English was my third language. So it was Bengali first, and then Arabic that I learned to read and write. But I got to the point where I do think in English. But it was a concerted effort because I wanted to be taken seriously, and it was very much like what you were saying with mixed methods, in that I had some solid ideas from a logical mathematical standpoint that I couldn't quite communicate linguistically, and that's why it forced me to go further into linguistic intelligence so that I can communicate with those who are non-mathematical and non-logical in that sense. So this way I can essentially be heard. Now, I wanted to save this for last. There is literally nobody who is listening to this podcast who would even remotely say that I have any semblance of emotional intelligence. I'm not going to get into my dating history or anything like that.
I thought this would be the perfect time.
Absolutely. But there is no one that I have, no family member, no friend, no ex, which is all I have, like hundreds of them. Nobody who would say, he has some emotional intelligence. None of that. And it's you struggle in that sense because you don't really know how to be there for someone, even though sometimes you mean well, but you don't quite know how to do it. But then it also goes back to that Phil Jackson, talent of understanding other people's talents and lack of abilities, where I've gone, been in relationships with women who understand that deficit in me, and they'll see that if I just I don't know, do a chore that's on their list or something like that. If we're living together, that's my way of saying, I know you're going through a tough time. I have no idea how to be there for you. So hopefully this shows you that I'm trying, because it's not just the chore. It's like I want whoever I'm with to be happy, but quite often I have no idea how to make them happy. My goodness, do I need therapy? Are we going to cut this out of the podcast? I have no idea. Maybe we'll keep this in there.
But I think that shows insight, though. It shows obviously interpersonal intelligence, that you have insight and you are trying to connect with someone else's emotional state. And we don't always, especially when people are dealing with death or whatever it may be, you're just God, there's nothing I can do, so what do I do? Or when someone's just having a bad day, sometimes those are so difficult. But I think the point of it, though, is that you're understanding, okay, someone else is hurting, right? So I should do something to try to show them that I care,
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a lot of different kinds of intelligences and talents that we've just scratched the surface of everything that there is to talk about in this regard. But it's just I love the world that we're living in right now, because I think just maybe 3 or 4 decades ago, I think logical and mathematical intelligence and maybe musical, well, that's more Renaissance and stuff so. Yeah, just not too long ago, these other kinds of intelligences and talents would not really be talked about in the way that we've been talking about them today. And I'm happy to see that emotional intelligence is something that's on the list, because we know plenty of people who are, think about like doctors, like brilliant doctors with very bad bedside manner.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
we were talking about it. Sometimes those are the best. They just have one job. They're just going to go in, go out, and they do not give a shit about you.
Exactly. One of the nurses that I dated was, she said the same thing. It was like, because like my impression was that she's a nurse, obviously she's in that arena, and I was talking about like, so tell me about these doctors with poor bedside manner. Like, do they like, why do hospitals hire them? And she looked at me like, you're talking about it from the outside in, which obviously I have, New York Foundling Hospital was not a medical hospital, you know, that I worked with. So when I was speaking with the nurse, she was like, you're talking about it from the outside in, but from the inside, the nurses have a greater deal of respect for the doctors with very poor bedside manner, because they are ridiculously efficient. Here's the issue. Here's the fix. I'm done with you. Don't say hi. Don't look. Don't no eye contact. Nothing like that. I'm out of here. I fixed your body. Here's the bill. And then, next. Whereas, the nurse, Melissa was her name, she said that, the doctors with good bedside manner have spent so much time focusing on their bedside manner that their medical practice suffers. And so too does their efficiency, because she was just like, she was very straight up about it. It was like, think about how long it takes to say hi. How's it going? What do you do for a living? Tell me more about yourself. You're talking about a 10, 15-minute conversation, which isn't a long conversation if you're on a date.
And they're not trying to be your therapist either. They're a doctor.
Exactly.
And it's very interesting. We kind of expect that from them. We expect them to have a good, bedside manner, when in reality they're really paid to just do one thing.
Exactly.
And
keep you alive.
keep you alive. Make sure your heart's still beating. So that's a really, really good example of that.
Yeah.
What I'm curious, and I don't know why, but I'm just wondering, like, serial killers, what kind of like intelligence must they have? Like, I don't know. Maybe they're more obviously like intrinsic emotional intelligence probably is not there. But then you have like sensing other people.
I think people who are serial killers
linguistically probably.
Well, definitely linguistically. They're, wordsmiths.
Yes.
But I think they have the ability to understand intelligence in such a way to manipulate people into believing certain things. Sort of like, actually, I don't know an analogy necessarily, but if I were to know what makes you tick, I can say just the right things to get you to do what I want you to do. And that does take a certain kind of intelligence, which I don't know.
So maybe it would be considered like interpersonal, but without like the empathy.
So interpersonal without the intrapersonal.
Yeah. Like you can understand what other people are feeling on like a logical front, but you have no understanding of the empathy. Like there's a total lack thereof.
Yeah, and lacking that empathy means that your interpersonal intelligence is now weaponized, right?
Yeah.
And therefore making you a serial killer.
Therefore you're Ted Bundy.
Right, exactly. Well, maybe not that far.
But just kidding.
But there is like, I think like sociopaths, what they tend to do is they intellectualize emotions. And they have sort of a lack of ability to experience emotions, but they know that it's a time to grieve, it's a time to be happy. And they're able to read other people. And this is where like sociopaths, for example, have a good amount of interpersonal intelligence, from my understanding.
And they can be very charismatic. Like they can have a very good like front of understanding of interpersonal intelligence, but no like feeling under.
But well, that's the thing with any kind of intelligence, isn't it? Like if we were to briefly touch upon other kinds of like linguistic intelligence, the first thing that comes out, let's weaponize all of these intelligences.
Oh, this is interesting. I like this.
So
let's weaponize
let's because this is empowering the opposition, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So what is the worst kind of logical mathematical intelligence? I think it's pretty simple. You know enough to build a weapon that could destroy the universe, nuclear weapons, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of knowledge can make you a very, very dangerous person to have around.
Bodily kinesthetic.
Well, I was thinking with the bodily kinesthetic, like, someone who's just big and strong and buff and quick and just like using that to beat everybody up that they see on the street.
Musical. How do you weaponize musical intelligence?
I think you can. And
really?
Yeah, because this is sort of a little bit of a touchy subject.
Yes,
Because musical intelligence, if you are the kind of musician that is also a linguist, you can create enough of a following and enough music to influence culture in a
negative light,
right? In what some might consider to be a negative light. So if we were to talk about like Cardi B and WAP, for example, right? So like, pretty sure you don't want your daughters walking around, or maybe you do. I don't know. Again, this is empowering the opposition after all, so maybe you do want your daughters walking around in that kind of fashion. But I think like the musical and the linguistic can go hand in hand in weaponizing through influence.
Yeah, narratives, using, and whether it's that or even if you're thinking about, just trying to get a certain kind of ideology, really, accepted by a society or a culture, that maybe is counterintuitive. Yeah, that could definitely be weaponized.
Yeah, naturalist.
How can you weaponize a naturalist? How would Bear Grylls be weaponized? Why
is it always Bear Grylls?
I just think of Bear Grylls. I hate Bear Grylls, but I just think of Bear Grylls.
I'm sure there are other survivors.
Steve Irwin. I like him much better.
So
rest in peace.
Yes, sorry. Absolutely. But naturalists can, weaponize as well. I assume by like taking natural products and, chemically combining them to be dangerous for ingestion, for example.
Poison. They could
poison would have been the quickest way to say what I just said. Right? Thank you. This is why we do this together. I know. Because I have a long, weird, and poison was the exact word that just summarized everything there.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay. Yeah. Spatial. I have no idea.
Spatial. So if we read that again, it would say...
Visualizing the world in 3-dimension, visual and spatial judgment. Booby traps.
Right, exactly. Booby traps. Yeah. Oh, that's even better. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, booby traps. Watching MacGyver. Oh, that's from my days, not from yours.
No, I do know that. The only reason I know it though is from SNL. But I think he's like MacGruber or something.
So MacGruber came after MacGyver.
I just know MacGruber.
Yeah, MacGruber. Okay. Groobs. But linguistic we talked about already. Just
Hitler for sure. Great example.
Absolutely. That's the thing with linguistic too, is that like, if you're charismatic, like it's
cult leaders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like anyone who's charismatic and excited about anything, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now with this intra and inter, this is what we started the conversation with. How do you weaponize emotional intelligence? And I think there you have the serial killers,
the sociopaths.
Right, exactly. Because like they're able to understand this is how the human mind works and this is how I will take advantage of it.
Without the repercussions of understanding or feeling that, but having the intuitive understanding of what these emotions can do and how to play on them and manipulate people.
Yeah.
And then the logical... Oh, yeah, we already talked about that.
Yeah.
so this took a dark turn, but it was
this is what we wanted, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to just, like, even when it's sometimes ridiculous, we do want to do the title, to do all this justice.
I really do. I'm really glad we touched on this, though, because I think it's so great to talk about all these things and how we see them in normal life, but it's also important to be aware of how these types of intelligence can be used or taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And just thinking about examples in our own lives, and just, different people throughout history. So this was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm Dr. Nafis Alam.
And I'm Lexi Wilson, and this has been Empowering the Opposition. See you next time.